That's wonderful, and I think that that is important, and again, we spoke a little bit about the fact that it's sometimes difficult for women to find people who will celebrate their successes so that they don't need to feel as if they, once again, need to dismiss the accomplishments and the achievements or even the ambitions that they have, even if they're, for some reason, they haven't been achieved, but this is what they want. And for somebody to take the dismissal of other people not as the final word on something, but to find those people who will keep encouraging them. And I think that it sounds like both of you have also made that a very big part of your lives, is to be encouraging of the next generations of women and men who are coming up. How did you come up with the plan for the 125th anniversary of co-education? How did this first start?
Well, it started actually at least 25 years ago. And again, I'm pleased to say we have in the audience with us Lillian Law, who was the person, my friend and colleague, who did most of the research or oversaw all of the research for what was the 100th anniversary of women's education at West Virginia University. That began with a colleague of mine in the English department, a male colleague, and I have been both moved and pleased how often during this symposium we have been able to say, yes, we've had male mentors as well as female mentors. Most of us have, and that doesn't surprise me, but I think it's wonderful and needs to be noted. So Jack Welch sadly died young. But Jack, I still remember, we were walking up one of the very long hills. Gina, I don't know if you've enjoyed our hills yet.
Not as much as others have.
One of the hills from, I think, Stansbury at that point up here. And he said, you know, Junior, I think, and this would have been in the centenary was 1891. This would have been like 86. You know, I think there's an anniversary coming up, Judith. I think there was we didn't begin as a co-educational, to use that word, school. So maybe you'd like to look into it. I think her name is Harriet something. She graduated. I don't know much more. Maybe you want to do something. Okay. Well, that something became, with many people's help, a 2-year celebration. 2 years because 10 brave women came to this university in 1889. One of them, Harriet Lyon, was a transfer from Vassar. We don't know whether she was pushed or urged or with what kind of...
It was her father and her brother-in-law / first cousins campaign for coeducation. She was not personally the kind of person who would do it if she could get out of it, but she couldn't get out of it. And she had a breakdown
later on, what she writes about. Right. I don't know if you can, I don't know how good the mics are, so I just want to repeat what Lillian Law has said, which is that Harriet Lyon herself, her own temperament, would not necessarily have made it possible to do this, but because of coming from a family in which education, women's education, was important. And she does write, and we do have the documents, and she describes herself as being treated as if she were an alien and an intruder. She transferred from Vassar, so she graduated 2 years after. So we had this opportunity. What we're celebrating, or what we celebrated then, were the 2 years that led to...
At the head of her class.
And at the head of her class. So that we are celebrating her graduation. So that was 25 years ago. And at that time, actually, towards the end of it, Lillian and I said, among other things, that, well, let me back up a little bit. One of the things we did in that celebration is we both created and buried, eventually, not a person, but a time capsule. We created a time capsule in which we put big and small documents so that we would remember what things were like, at least on this campus, with the hope that in 25 years, which seemed like an enormously long period of time, we would dig up, exhume, we don't know the language to talk about this thing in, but, take from the ground this capsule and celebrate the 25th anniversary of the 100th anniversary. Those 25 years passed very quickly, and in fact, that event will be, I think, on April 5th or 6th. 5th, thanks. There will be a celebration. The president, the provost, a lot of wonderful people will be there, and we will examine those materials, and before we put that back in the fall, add documents of where we are now. So that was a big deal. And so we are 25 years from that 100th anniversary. So I think that in itself is a sign that we have kept alive. And the we now, when we say, are we there yet? That's one of the things I've been thinking about since we asked this question. It's clear that the we is not just women. It's clear that the we is not just about women. It's clear that we're talking about fundamental revolutions in how knowledge is produced and valued. So no, we are not there. The there is the other question to ask. But it's a big we. And we've been working together and continuing to celebrate.
That's great. It's a wonderful line. And Carol, what was your...
Well, I have a memory of Judith sitting in my office talking about last spring, maybe. I'm not sure of the date, but we were talking about how the next anniversary was coming up, and we wanted somehow to have the library be part of this, and
fundamentally have it, not just
well,
somehow.
yes, the word fundamentally.
And that's not just because the dean is in the back of the room. Although I do. And it did, can I just interrupt for a moment? Because it took really having deans and presidents. You really, at an institution, you cannot do this without the institutional commitment, I don't think.
So a discussion began about weaving the work and the people of the West Virginia Regional History Collection together with me, who was now the Director of Library Strategic Initiatives and deeply involved in the Center for Women and Gender Studies since close to the beginning anyway. And our dean, I want to recognize our dean, John Cawthorn, was very excited about this, and we might want to ask him to answer a few questions about this as well, because he has given his total support, and that includes budgetary support for this, for us, rather extravagant program. But I'm pleased to have been the sort of producer of something extravagant on the for the benefit of this cause, which I think is part of our greatest life's work.
That's wonderful, and I'm delighted to be part of the celebration. And I think last night's crowd at the event was also evidence of that. It was represented so many different groups, just from the people that I got to speak to, so many people from the community, as well as from the university, different ages. It's not different backgrounds. It's not often that you get that under one roof, and I think it was a testament to the library as a space that people wanted to come to, that they felt good. You said it was the inaugural use of that space across the way. I mean, it was terrific. I mean, and ending with, just for those of you who weren't there, it ended with a woman getting up and talking about how one of her great-great-great-grandmother, was it?
Aunt Mabel, I believe.
Yes, and who was part...
Great Aunt Mabel.
Great Aunt Mabel. Just great aunt? No, it's got to be longer than that.
Christy, could you?
Oh,
It was just her aunt?
I believe so.
but she talks about somebody being one of the original 10.
Yeah.
Can't be her aunt, she wasn't that old. I mean,
It was Aunt Mabel, I remember that.
it was Aunt Mabel. Well, somewhere along, I don't know. Again, I'm not good at math, and maybe people last longer down here than they do in New York City. Now, my great aunts kicked off much sooner than that.
She never knew her aunt.
Yeah, but
She already died before she was born. I guess she knew her uncle was a child. So
But
I've actually.
it went back to one of the original 10. It was,
Yeah.
but just to end with somebody who had a genetic memory, if not an actual memory, of the original women who were here. It was such a lovely group to have all under one aegis. That was also, I thought, testament to the library. I mean, as a place. But I wanted to ask both of you, but I'd like to start with Carol. What do you see as the next challenge facing women's education? What institutions need to provide, what they can do to form even greater connections with the community?
Right now, I am thinking programmatically because of the work that I'm doing. And I have always valued intergenerational contact between ages and races and just diversity. Somehow I feel when things are diverse in an audience, I feel more alive. And because there are so many life perspectives that are coming together. Well, I think there's a danger from my generation to the generation going to college now that we're so separated by years and decades that we don't talk as much as we probably should. I still go to the Women's Studies 170 classes when I'm invited, and the posters that are here on display, we had the poster presenters, the students themselves, they have posters as an assignment, and I get to talk to them then, and when I'm in class, I get to talk to them, but it's, 50 minutes or 75 minutes, and that's not the kind of talk I'm thinking about right now, because that always focuses on research. I'm talking about lived experience as a college student and lived experience as who I am, and getting people in their 30s and across all of the age barriers to talk and to come together and find out about common shared things. So programmatically, I think there's some possibilities for bringing representatives of the undergraduate class and previous classes maybe, and the older generation, whatever that means, together to talk around. We would have to find a really compelling subject that we want people to talk about, but I think that there are commonalities that we share across the board, and I think it could be very interesting. The closing thing I want to say on this question is that behind the scenes, the dean's administrative associate, Thea Brown, said to me this morning, she was fielding catering and all that, but she said, that speaker was fabulous, and those people were really engaged, and she said, when was Harriet Lyon born anyway? And I told her I knew the year, but I didn't know the date, but that I would see someone today who probably would know the date, or could find out if she didn't know it. She said, I think we need to have a Harriet Lyon Day every year at WVU, because I could feel that people wanted to tell their stories to each other, and she said, that's not going to go away. We should do this annually, and maybe I'll talk to the boss and ask him if we can do this every year. Did John leave already? Oh, darn.
But Thea's here.
Now Thea's here. I just mentioned you. And Harriet Lyon Day.
Yeah, that would be great.
So programming of that sort to continue the storytelling, because Thea, you come up to the microphone and say what you said to me this morning.
And other firsts.
Just a minute, Martin's on the way.
Right here.
I was just really impressed with both events that I went to yesterday, and I felt like the people in the audience just needed a day to talk about their experiences of being women and academics. And a lot of times, I mean, speaking as a African-American woman, I know that sometimes women's categories get lumped into other things as well, but maybe if we just had a day that celebrates women and women in academics specifically, I just felt like we needed that. And it seemed like yesterday the women here wanted to talk and tell their stories. And I think it would be great for younger women to hear that. I know you could hear gasp yesterday when there was people talking in the math, from the math department about the things she had gone through. So that was just my idea.
Well, that's a fine idea.
That's a great idea.
We'll do it next year, and you can come back.
Please let me come back. Thank you. But I think that, first of all, it'd be much better than Sadie Hawkins Day. I mean, it would be, girls running after boys to get them to date, right? Tragic memories of Sadie Hawkins Day. But something where women get together and tell the truth about our lives. Because I think that often our students, or the young women on campus, whether they're undergraduates, graduate students, they work here, they are helpers in some way, they were at food service, I don't care, but they're women who work on the campus. And we don't know that much about each other's lives, and we could learn a lot about again, I know, I'm good friends because I've taught at UConn for 28 years. I know that the women who really run the university are the administrative assistants. Yes. And that they could shut the joint down if they stopped working for 1 hour. I gave the talk on Administrative Assistants Day. I said, you could all stop everything.
That movie,
In its
95,
tracks.
comes to mind.
Absolutely, you could just stop everything. But to get to know women's stories, how did you get to where you were? Young women don't know how women progress. They're afraid. Well, how do you do that and have kids? How do you do that and have a life? How do I do that if I'm a lesbian? Do I have to pretend not to do? How do I do that if I don't want to have kids but I want to be married? There are all of these questions that somebody has like a secret code to. And we actually talk honestly about our lives. I was terrified until I was 40 of what people were thinking about me. This is the point at which I decided I was going to stand up. This was the point at which I decided that I wasn't going to let people intimidate me into not doing my life's work. It would be great to tell the truth, and it's great when we tell the truth about ourselves, because it's wonderfully freeing for ourselves, let alone for other people to hear it. So.
Maybe follow up on that and answer the question that Carol answered, which is, for me, not programmatic. I would say it was almost spiritual, and it has to do with being 75. And I love that. So yesterday, for those of you who weren't there, Gina, I don't know if you began with telling your age and your weight, but I loved it. She said that's really what everybody, well, not everybody, but the women in the audience usually went,
59 and 175 pounds. 157 pounds. I bear with my numbers.
Okay, and I'm 75, and it depends on how many clothes I'm wearing and the scale. But anywhere between 137 and... So anyway, but I thought that was absolutely wonderful. But for me, I think what I'm most aware of at this stage of life, and it feels like a very alive stage of life, but is the importance of what women's lives contribute to survival of the species. It is at that level. I do feel when we say we've come a long way, we have a long way to go, that's a horizontal line. I'm not looking at a horizontal line now. I'm looking vertically. I'm looking to go deep. And we are living in dangerous times. And whether women choose to be mothers, are mothers, we have been the nurturers. We have understood what it means when children die in other people's or our arms. And I think the survival of the species depends upon women's stories and experiences and knowledge. And I think we forget again and again and again, so we have to be reminded, and that's the definition of history. And I think that this event is part of that telling, retelling, preserving, honoring the stories, which is another way of what we just heard. But I do feel it at a very profound level, in which I alternate between fear and despair, and conviction, courage, and thank God, curiosity. I still feel that has probably been my saving my emotionally saving grace. Even during times when I have made mistakes, I can figure out what that's all about. So that's what I feel very, very deeply at this stage in my life. Of what's missing is what we have the obligation and the opportunity to provide, which is the truth. And it's Muriel Rukeyser, isn't it, who said if one woman told the truth about her life, the world would split open. I think if she told the truth about our lives, the world may have a chance of staying together.
I think that's a wonderful way to end. Can we have a round of applause, then we'll open it up for questions. Thank you. Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you, Judith. Please, do we have questions? Sir.
Christopher Wilkinson, Professor Emeritus of Music History at the University, 194 pounds and 69. Getting the vital questions about me out of the way. I just wanted to provide another reinforcing perspective on this period of time. As the spouse of Carol Wetzel Wilkinson, I have been very involved in her work and indeed have made a small contribution of my own. Two things that immediately came to mind as I was reflecting on the past 25 years upon the genesis of the Center for Women's Studies, as it was then, now the Center for Women and Gender Studies, are first, that the university, like academia in the nation, has evolved in such a way that women have moved happily into positions of influence and power that they did not have then in many disciplines that had previously been all male or whose paradigms were entirely male in perspective. That's a good thing, a very good thing, an essential thing. Also, it was for me very enlightening to take something of an active role in extending those boundaries of engagement with women's issues back in the 1980s when I offered a course in the history of women in Western music for several years. And what I've observed is, and I think this is the point of the second observation, is how far more naturally engagement with women's issues in various disciplines has become. That is to say, in my field of music history, it would be unthinkable now to discuss the history of American musical culture without a vital role for women. 25 years ago, who knew from women in music, except in the audience or seeking the attentions of the artists on the stage, appropriately or otherwise. But this means, and I will conclude with this, that the ultimate goal there is a moving line. I was thinking it's sort of like the asymptotic curve associated with quadrilateral equations in algebra, and that's all I know about that. I cannot calculate one of those. I just know that there are these axes, and the line gets closer and closer but never touches. In our case, those axes are moving, and we have to keep moving closer to them even as they keep moving. So that is the there. The there is a recognition that we got to keep moving. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great start. Thank you. Please, Lauren.